Welcome to the Sons of Mjolnir podcast.
The Sons of... what?
This isn't your Sons of Macaroni, yeah!
The Sons of Mjolnir?
This is Sons of Mjolnir, yeah!
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Beyond Invincible. As always, I am one of your hosts, Fat Thor, and I am, as always, joined by the wonderful, the most handsome co-host in the world, Sean Mott from Metalcore Nerds. As always, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today. I'm so excited to talk about this episode.
I'm so happy to be here, and boy, this episode, it's a doozy.
Dude, like we said last week, I think that was like I think we ended the episode with that quote, Sean, this one is a doozy. And you were right, my friend. It is a mighty, mighty doozy. But before we get into all the dooziness of this episode, start off as we always do. Sean, overall thought. I mean, we already kind of said our thoughts, I guess, a little bit, but overall thoughts on this episode. What did you think?
Man, it's kind of all been building up to this, in an unexpected way. Like I said last week, I didn't think we would see Omni-Man so soon or in this way. But what an interesting episode to finally kind of relate with Omni-Man in ways while still being so pissed off at him.
Mm-hmm.
But what a wild turn this series has taken. And like we were talking about before, I've not read past the comics that covered season 1 basically, so I have no idea what's coming, and I am so excited to see what happens because I can only think it starts an all-out war, I would imagine, and I'm very curious in the fate of Omni-Man also. That's like I wonder what really happens there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the major kind of questions that we're left with, and one of the big cliffhangers for this second part of this season is, like you're saying, what's going to happen to Omni-Man? And like, what is his role after what happens in this episode, which we'll get to the ending of this and what happens to Nolan. But first off, I want to talk about the reunion. The father and son reunion. I absolutely loved the way that they played it in the show. And so, as always, for the comic knowledge for all you guys out there, so this episode is going to be taking place over issues 26 and 29. So, like we were talking about a little bit, Sean, this episode is kind of, I would say, one of the most streamlined episodes that we've gotten, where, as we've talked about in previous episodes, they kind of pull from a lot of different issues. This is pretty much, this whole episode basically follows, like I said, the beats from 26 and 29. And the thing that I wanted to bring up is, so again, we get this father and son reunion of Mark and Omni-Man, and in the book, Mark is very much like, oh, daddy, like, I missed you, you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, he still is like, you're an asshole for what happened on Earth, but he is very much just like, oh, like, you're alive, like, you're still around, like, you can come back to Earth with me. Like, he even says in the book, he says, come back with me, come back to me, to mom, make everything the way that it used to be. So, like, very much like, just like, oh, dad, like, I fucking love you. Like, we had some problems, but I love you. In the show, though, I really like Mark. Like I said last week, how I would be like, dude, fuck you. That's exactly how Mark is. And he is just like, which I also thought was really great and interesting, is he hugs him. The first thing he does is hug him. And then he immediately is like, fuck you, dude. And I just loved that. And I kind of similar to what we talk about with Debbie. With Mark in the show, he's a lot more in charge of himself and not like so dependent on that relationship with Nolan, and a lot more independent. Right. And so, like I said, I think, again, small change from the book, but something that just makes the character of Mark much better. The whole dynamic between them, I think, is a lot better throughout this entire episode. So, Sean, after my babbling, what did you think of the father-son reunion with Mark?
Yeah, I loved it. A lot like you said, it's not just cut and dry. It's not like, oh, I missed you, I love you. It's complicated.
Yeah.
And you do see him hug, like I said in last week's episode, like, it's still his dad. You know what I mean? and he still has that love inside of him for him. But it doesn't mean he has to forgive him right away. There's a
Yeah.
lot of atonement to be had
Hmm.
to make this okay. And I think Nolan only makes it worse throughout
Oh,
this
dude.
episode in
That's
ways.
that's why, like, we talked about this, and we'll talk about this some more throughout this episode, but it's like there's just no redemption for Nolan for me. Like you said, like I get he's his dad, and like don't get me wrong, like there are some things it's like, oh, like maybe he has changed. But like you said, it's just like everything he does just makes things so much worse. Like if I were Mark, I would be like exactly how he is in the show, which is again why I like this change so much, is because I
Mm.
feel like it's just a lot more realistic. At least, again, we talked about this last week. Maybe I'm just a jerk and an asshole, but it's like, bro, I don't care if you're my dad. Like, that's fucked, man. And so I think that leads kind of perfectly in the next kind of big topic of discussion for this episode is we find out that not only is he the ruler of this planet, he's got another kid. Mark's got a brother, which is huge. Again, we talked about this before. This is a breakdown slash discussion, full spoilers, but there are still things that I want you guys to be surprised about and excited for in the show. So I don't want to get too much into like the comic side of the brother and all that stuff. But Sean, just based like initial reaction, what was your when you found out that he had another kid? Were you like, dude, what the fuck? Like, I mean, exactly what
Yeah,
Mark says. Mark literally is like, what the
basically.
fuck?
Yeah, I mean, his feelings are so warranted in that moment because you are like, "What the fuck, man? Like, really?
Bug
You already
people,
had another
man.
kid?" I do love how Omni-Man does say he's like, "My life is gone. It's dead. I am never going back to Earth."
Hmm.
Which makes sense. He's like, "I can't go back to Earth." He kind of
Yeah.
burned that bridge pretty hard.
Hmm.
But again, even showing him like arriving at the planet and stuff like that, I think it's important to show. Like, I know you said he isn't redeemable, and I'm not saying he's fully redeemable, but he definitely has some redeeming qualities in this
Hmm.
episode
A hundred
that
percent.
I think make the character so much more complicated than before, and I really like that because
Hmm.
it really the show really blurs the lines like a lot like The Boys does. It's very hyper realized, superhero commentary, and it's so cool to kind of see that, being like, wow, this dude really fucked shit up,
Hmm.
but you're like, ah, I can see the good in him.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck.
No, I completely agree. And like when I say for me that Nolan's not redeemable,
Mm,
that's why I preface like for me. But I
okay.
think that it's a very great discussion to have, and I think that
Yeah.
it's a very great like it is. Like, I totally agree with you. You can go on both sides of it, and I think, like you said, there are 100% redeeming qualities of Nolan and Omni Man for sure. But again, that's why I preface for me. Like that's just my personal opinion. But I think
Right.
that that's one of the genius things of the story and of Nolan's character is that discussion and like how
Right.
you kind of fall on that line. So again, I really love the changes that they're making to the show, and to your point of like Nolan, changing and or being somewhat redeemed. Another really interesting not change but just a little addition is when they're having this conversation, Omni-Man admits, he says, what I did on Earth was unforgivable. And that he doesn't say that in the book. And again,
Damn.
the
Okay.
conversation plays out very similarly. And he definitely shows like some remorse in the book of like, oh, like that was fucked up. I forget exactly what he says, but that the specific line of like what I did was unforgivable on Earth was not in the book. And I thought it was just again a great addition into the show and just such a small thing, but it goes to your point of, yeah, Nolan does have redeeming qualities and he is capable of change, because in season 1 he would not have said that. Like he
Right.
was gung-ho, like everyone's gonna die and it's gonna be a party. But
Yeah.
like I said, now we with just that one little line, we like kind of get confirmation that he has really changed. But again, is that enough? Like, that's where like the question comes in.
It's hard because this even makes me think back to season 1 where he didn't try to conquer the planet until his hand was basically forced, you know. I mean, I guess he kind of started with the Gardens of the Globe. That was kind of his like start point, and I think
Mhm.
it's because he found out Mark had powers and he could convince him to help him take over the world, and then that would probably be his plan. And he's like, "Oh, hey, Viltrum Empire, I got a son. He's
Let's
with
do
us,"
it.
and that maybe is what keeps him, in good graces with them. But it's almost like, would he have fully gone on with it, if he didn't get fully found out? I don't know. It's a tough thing to think about.
That is a great question. Like, if he never had that fight with Mark, and like you said, he was never found out, his like secret plan, kept going on, what would that look like? I think that's a very interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, or if he has like an actual conversation, not out of necessity and in of his own choice with Mark. Could Mark have persuaded him otherwise?
True. Or
Maybe,
like we talked about before, could it have gone the opposite route and Mark joins him, and then he's one of the other all the other universes where he goes evil?
Yeah, it could go either way,
Yeah. But like I said, Omni-Man has another kid, and it's Mark's half brother, which again, I don't want to spoil too much for you guys, but that is definitely something very important in the books, very important person. But besides that, something I want to talk about, let's start getting into the nitty-gritty of this episode, the action, if you will, of this episode. Dude, like you said, it takes everything from season one, and like we thought Guardians of the Globe was crazy. Like this whole episode is just fucking nuts. And we get at least like, I want to say like 20 minutes of just
Yeah.
Viltrumite action, beating the shit out of each other. And where I want to start is with one of Mark's first fights with so the Viltrumite is called Lucan, that's his name. Big dude. And he finds out that Omni-Man has this kid and Mark has to protect them from this guy. And I just obviously I love the scene. We're talking, we talked about it. We love this episode, but like the one part I really loved was when Lucan's beating the shit out of Mark and he literally holds him down with a
The
finger
finger.
and like is just like pushes his head into the fucking cement and is just like, you're Nolan's son, like you're basically like, you're a bitch, dude. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think about this first fight, Sean, and Lucan coming after Mark?
Dude, I loved it. I mean, I loved the kind of arrival of the Viltrumites too,
Mm-hmm.
because you find out that's why Omni-Man called for Mark, because he knew that they were going to come from him, because they knew they would have known the word of him abandoning his post was got out and they would find him eventually. And he's like, I can't take them alone, but we can take them on together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again is he kind of tries to like guilt him into it, being like, he's your brother. And he's like,
Yeah.
that's a you problem, dog. Like,
No,
that's not a
literally.
me problem, you know. But at the same time, he's like, he knows this is a problem he's gonna have to deal with, regardless of his dad or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. But this fight was brutal. Like you said, that finger part where
Dude.
he's just pushing down like into the ground, so gnarly, dude.
Dude,
And,
Lucan's
and then
not one to fuck with for sure. And we got I
no,
forget his name. Forgive me, everyone out there. If you guys know the name, drop it in the comments. Sean, you might know. But my man, John Stewart, Green Lantern, is voicing him. The who did the voice for John Stewart, Green Lantern in the Justice League cartoon.
oh,
I picked out that voice immediately. I'm like, oh baby, in Darkest Night or Blackest Night, Brightest Day, whatever the lanterns say.
yeah.
But something I want to bring up that you brought to my attention that I think is a really great point, as far as like, Mark getting involved in this whole conflict in the first place. Again, it kind of goes back to the same change that I was talking about earlier with just Mark's whole feelings towards Nolan and Omni-Man. And like, so here, what I really love about in the show is, like you just said, his reasoning for joining this fight is very much focused on the people of Thraxa, the baby, like his new brother. And like, that's really why he joins this fight. But again, in the book, it's a lot more so like, oh, dad needs my help. You're right. Like, it's like,
Right.
he's asking me. And like, again, I don't want to make it seem like in the book, Mark is just a complete bitch for Omni-Man. Like, he definitely has feelings, about what happened on Earth and all that stuff. But it's very, again, much more like, oh, he needs my help. He's my dad. Like, I'm going to help him. But I like, again, in the show, how they really stuck to. Mark says it a couple times in this episode, just like, fuck you, dude. And like, again, like, he's only helping because of the innocent people that are in danger. And I
Right.
really love that. And I have another kind of interesting thing, which is in the book, but not in the show, but I think is a really great point. In again, going back to, Mark accepting Omni-Man or forgiving him, is so we learn in this episode that the Thoraxins, their lifespan is like super short. I think they say it's like,
Year.
yeah, a year or like even like 9 months or something like that. And so Mark makes the point in the book of, like, he basically says, like, you told me that I was gonna have to watch everyone on Earth die, and like that's why Earth wasn't saving. But these
Mm,
people's lifespan are like a fraction of the people on Earth.
literally.
So what makes them so special? Why are you trying to save them and you weren't willing to save Earth? And I think that's, again, not a very huge change, but just I think adds a little bit more depth to the
Yeah.
whole conversation of, like I said, is Nolan redeemable, and like what is, like, yeah, what he's doing is technically a good thing, like, trying to protect the Thoraxa. But again, I think that's a really great point, that of, like Mark said, their lifespans are nothing compared to humans, and you were more than willing to destroy all the humanity and Earth at large. So like,
Right.
why should I believe or accept that you just have changed for these fucking bug people, right?
Right.
But yeah, like I
Right.
said,
That's such a good
very
point.
yeah, very small change, but I think I wish they would have added that, which I guess they didn't really need to, since they do again harp so heavily on Mark being like, nah, dude, fuck you. So I think it wasn't really needed, but again, I just thought it was a very interesting point that, is arisen.
Yeah, for sure. I did like how he asks what the kid's name is, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, like we let we let our own choose their names when they can talk," and
Hmm.
basically they bring up the point again, like, yeah, our lifespan's only a year, and he should be speaking at any moment, basically.
Yeah.
Which I'm wondering how long his lifespan, because they did say the Viltrumite in him it will
Hmm.
prolong his life, but how long?
Yeah.
That's I feel like that's a very interesting thing to think about, because
I'm
obviously
not.
Mark's life it'll be very prolonged.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, like we don't even know what a lifespan of a Viltrumite even is,
Hmm.
but like how long will this kid live? You
Yeah.
know?
And I can't remember. This is where my memory gets foggy. I can't remember if this happened, if this is said. I know it's said in the book, but I'm not sure if it was also said in this episode in the show. But Nolan says, like you were saying, because he's half Viltrumite, half like this bug, species, his aging is different than like a regular Viltrumite, right? But since he does have Viltrumite in him, he says that he'll live at least for a couple thousand years, is
Oh
what he's,
shit.
yeah, because like that's like one of the, like, ways he gets Mark to kind of get more into the idea of his brother. He's like, yeah, like these people have super short lifespans, but he's like, while his lifespan is shorter, he's still gonna live for like a couple thousand years. So it's like, what's gonna happen? How is he going to live on this planet when everyone lives for 9 months? And he, by
Right.
time he's a year old, every single person on that planet will have died. And they'll
Yeah,
be newborns and shit. So it's like,
it's
it
rough.
causes some problems for sure.
Yeah, they definitely didn't say that in the show.
Okay, so yeah, that's in the book though, which I don't think that's a spoiler for what's to come, but yeah, so that just kind
That's
of
good
gives you
info
an
to know.
idea of,
Yeah.
like I said, how that kind of gene mix, comes to play. Let's talk about the action, and then we can talk about the other kind of couple other things that we get, throughout
Yeah.
the episode that I think are kind of important. But so like we talked about, Lucan's beating the shit out of Mark. Omni-Man comes in and, saves the day, which is another really cool change from the book. In the book, we don't see how Omni-Man, quote unquote, kills Lucan. Spoiler for later in the episode. It just
Right.
kind of happens off page, but I like how we actually, like, he literally,
Brutal.
dude, brutalized, dude, guts hanging out. My man Lucan was going through it. So again, another just cool change and something that I think, like we talk about, the animation and the show allows us to kind of see these little extra things. But then we get big Viltrumite fight with Omni-Man, Mark, and the other two Viltrumites that came in. And then this comes into another change, which we talked about last week, is the inclusion of Thula, one of the Viltrumites. She's the one with the knife braid. So in the books, she's not involved in this, just as, like we talked about last week, she wasn't involved with the Alan stuff either. So I'm not sure why they, in the books, it's just like we talked about last week, stock Viltrumites. Like, it's Lucan, and then
But she's in the books otherwise?
she's in the books, just not at this moment. We haven't in the books, we haven't gotten to her yet.
Okay, interesting.
So it's, like I said, it's interesting that they are doing a little switcheroo on us and adding her to this stuff. But so, like I said, we get big fight between all of them, and dude, going back to just like the brutalness and the
So brutal.
dude, so brutal and just like so cool to watch, and especially coming from the comic, like, for all my comic readers out there, and if you've ever seen a comic book, you kind of know what I'm talking about, where it's like the action obviously is just like laid out in panels and like pages, and there's this in this I think it's issue 29 is what we're talking about, where this big fight takes place. We get a whole 2-page spread of just like panel of just like boom, punch, 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 blood. There's big Omni-Man and Mark just beating the shit out of these dudes in the middle of the page. It's awesome. It's great. But it is just so cool seeing that translated onto the screen in action, actual movement. Like, oh, dude, it was so cool and satisfying. And before I get into some more nerdy stuff about this fight, what were your thoughts of this whole sequence of Omni-Man and Mark going at the Viltrumites, his little pep talk he gets, all that?
Yeah. It's a big moment for Mark, because I love even how Omni-Man's like, you're fighting like you're on Earth. You need to stop holding back or we're both gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see him just like finally whoop some ass, which is nice.
Dude, yeah.
Which is nice. But you see he still holds back, and that, like, it gets him at the end. He gets stabbed, knife braided,
Dude,
right in the stomach.
the way Omni-Man takes her out, though, holy
Dude, the
shit.
elbow and like obliterates her jaw. Like, what the fuck?
Dude, that was probably one of the coolest kills that we've gotten on the show, I think. I mean, there's been some really great ones, but yeah, that's the thumbnail right there.
Even the other guy, I can't remember his name, but like his
Stock
head just like
Viltrumite.
imploding, basically, like
Yeah.
almost like
Mm-hmm.
that was so brutal to watch. Like, it looked like his brains were just gonna implode,
Yeah,
like
it reminded
so
me of, I forget the guy's name, but it reminded me again of the Guardians fight when he squishes that one dude's head. Very similar, like with the eyes popping up. Dude, this show, talking about this show is so funny sometimes, because you're like, yeah, his eyes are popping out and his guts are hanging out.
yeah.
But something I want to bring up again, kind of the differences and or similarities is, so like you said, Mark kind of we get this moment of like Mark having this realization, like, oh, I'm not on Earth, and not only am I not on Earth, but I can't fight everyone the same way that I would fight, say, Doc Seismic, or who had insert villain here. And one that's obviously super important for Mark as a character, but something I really love in the show is, I feel like, at least in my opinion, it seems like in the show he kind of lets loose a lot more than he does in the book. And
Oh,
again,
okay.
very similar conversation that, he has with Nolan. And I think it plays out a little differently, but so he has the conversation, and then that's when we get that panel I was just telling you about, the 2-page spread of them, fighting all these Viltrumites. And so, like, don't get me wrong, Mark definitely fights back, and like he, gets into the action. And maybe again, it's the differences from like on page and on screen. It just seems a little bit more impactful, I guess, in animation. But it seemed again in the show, he took Omni-Man's words a little bit more to heart, and like kind of had that realization moment, and he starts going at Thula like pretty fucking brutally. And I thought he was gonna go at the end. He kind of, like you said, he still kind of holds back. But in the book, it's like he gets a couple punches in, but he gets his ass beat pretty much by stock Viltrumite, the one that Nolan is fighting. And Nolan, similarly to how it happens in the show, but Nolan comes and saves him. But again, I feel like in the show it was very much like he took a lot more charge and was like, all right, let's fucking do this, which I really
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome to see him, like, finally be like fully in his element, I guess,
Mhm.
as like a hero in the way he was fighting and everything. But yeah, it was brutal to see him get stabbed at the end. You're
Yeah.
like, damn it, not
Dude,
again.
and then again, talking about brutal shit, and then we get, which this took me by surprise. Like, again, I knew it was coming, but it still surprised me. Lucan's alive, dude that we were just talking about, who got his guts ripped out, and just like comes down and breaks Nolan's back like from the sky, which again just was like the way they did it in the show, like the shock value of it, I thought was like really well done. And also in the books, that's how Nolan takes Lucan out originally when he's fighting with Mark. He does the same. He comes in from the sky and does like a back crack.
Oh,
So in and it plays out the exact same way in the book as well, with Lucan coming in like just surprise kick, but just like it kind of calls back that from when Nolan was fighting him.
oh,
But
damn. Okay.
just like again, just totally break the bat Bane style. Just you even hear the crack of the back. And then it brings us to like the kind of biggest revelation of this episode, and kind of the cliffhanger that we're left on, which we got to talk about. The other Viltrumites show up, and he's like, mission accomplished, blah blah blah. They show up and they take Nolan, and there's two things we have to discuss here. So the first being, Nolan tells Mark, he says, something along the lines of like, don't forget the good I did. Kind of going back to what we were talking about. Can he be redeemable? Can he, actually change? He tells him, don't forget the good that I've done. And he tells him to go read his books. So for
Right.
people out there that might not remember, on Earth, Nolan's day job was an author. He was like an author. I don't think specifically science fiction, but wrote a bunch of books. And he tells him to go read his books, which is like, why? What? Like we're about to be invaded and we're talking about reading some books here. So like that, again, big question to ponder. Big kind of, what the hell does that mean? So before we get to the other big thing, let's talk about that first. Sean, what do you think about Nolan's books? What do you think that could mean? What do you think is in those books that Mark can discover?
I feel like it might be like kind of what I was hinting at earlier. Like he might have found like a hidden love for Earth or something that he didn't fully let on to.
Mm-hmm.
Because you even see before the big fight, he like chokes Mark and is like, why do I feel this way? And he's crying. And
Mm-hmm.
Mark's like, this is how you should have felt on Earth.
Which is
It,
another great additional line. So again, that scene happens exactly the same in the book, but not with that line. And
mm,
again, going back to how Mark is very much like, nah, dude, fuck you. Like you said, he brings up like, this is how you should have felt on Earth.
yeah, it's great. And like what I talked about with our brief thoughts of the episode, that they said he's going to be executed. So it's like, is he going to make it out of there, or is he really going to be done? Is
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what seemingly was the main antagonist of the show dead already.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like there's so many threats in the show, and obviously, like we've said, Omni-Man is the key to everything that's happened in the season.
Mm.
He's been the catalyst for it all. So to kind of to flip everything on its head and see this other side of him and be like, you were kind of rooting for him, and you're like, man, he kind of has the same goal as Mark in ways. It's rough. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah. And I think you just bring up a very good point that I didn't really think about is like in this situation, Nolan is kind of in Mark's position that he was in season one with like trying to protect Thraxa and stop the Viltrumite, empire. So I think that that's a very interesting kind of flip in the dynamic of their relationship and probably
Right.
gives Nolan a little bit more insight of like why Mark felt. Because again, we talked about, Viltrumites are not obviously they're aliens, so they're not people, but like they're not normal, right? Like they're
No,
fucking
they're just
psychos. Like
killing machines.
they're psycho freaks. And it's like they don't think of people on other planets or species as anywhere near equal to them. So I think again, like having that kind of flipped and having Nolan be in the position of trying to save these people that are not in their, minds equal to them, I think is super important and kind of again goes to that question and gives a little bit more credence to can he change? Is he able to be redeemed? But then
Exactly.
so I mean I can't wait to get to the book stuff. I think that's going to be awesome and that's all I'm going to say. But the other cool thing about this episode and the other again major kind of cliffhanger that we're left with is Mark is now in charge of taking over the Earth for the Viltrumite Empire. So we get a quick little cameo from General Kregg, and this an important character that will come into play later on. But
Makes sense.
we kind of it's almost a callback to the ending of season one where we have Mark laying in a like basically a pool of his own blood, just like totally out of it.
Yeah.
And like I said, General Kregg basically tells him like, hey man, like, you survived this, which means that we accept you into the Viltrumite Empire now. And that means that you are now tasked with taking over the Earth and getting it ready for our rule. So basically taking over Omni-Man's job. Exactly what Omni-Man wanted him to do. And they just leave him there. There's like, okay, we'll check we'll be checking in soon. See ya. And just leaves us with that. So again, Sean, I need your thoughts on this. How
What is he gonna do?
yeah. Literally.
Because he says, you take it over, or we're coming and we'll do it ourselves.
Which we just
Along with
saw
you with
how that looks on Thraxa.
yeah. Very bad. Totally decimated this planet.
And that was only 3 of them. That's another thing I think we have to remember. Like we're talking about
It was
this.
basically 2.
Yeah,
Because
basically
the one
2
went
of them.
after Mark,
Yeah. So it's like imagine what 5 of them could do, let alone like an arm, like hundreds, an army. Like, oh my god, dude. It's just
That's like what I'm thinking. Like, is he gonna I don't know. It's like almost like he's got to form this like Avengers team to like fight the Viltrumites, but like who else is
yeah, I
gonna
was gonna
stand a
say
chance other than
who's gonna
him?
be on that team. Even Alan. Alan would be like the best next person besides Mark. But it's like we just saw how Alan did against 3 Viltrumites. Again, we're talking hundreds, like an army of them. Like
Yeah, I mean, and
there's
you
no
saw in that
one.
alternate universe what Omni-Man and Invincible did to that planet. They totally took it over.
Yeah.
Basically, like the resistance didn't stand a chance,
Yeah.
So it's like,
And
what are
not
they
only
gonna
that,
do?
but we just learned from Levy in the previous episodes that all other multiversal marks are fucking bad.
Right.
So it's like even if we were like, oh, like let's like we're doing a Marvel, we're doing a multiverse kind of thing, and we're bringing in all the marks, right? It's like they're all fucking assholes. There would all be like, let's go, man.
Yeah.
Viltrumites all day. So it's again like, what is he gonna do? I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I am just Amazon, send us the rest of the season right now. I can't wait anymore, dude. I need to find
I
out
know.
what's going on. Where they're gonna take this.
I know. I need it.
No, I need it. I need it now. But again, that's the big cliffhanger that we're left with. So we've talked about this before, and this isn't the end of the season. This is just the first half of the season. And
Yeah.
I don't, you might know better than I, but do we have a release date for the second half of the season, or is that
No, they said it somewhere.
still?
Just early next year.
Damn, next year. Damn. Which
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. Like a good month hiatus. I think that kind of
Right.
that tracks, because then we get holiday season, and then I would imagine that it's going to pick up like right after New Year, sometime early
I would
January.
imagine because we get the
Yeah.
boys next year sometime too. We don't
Oh,
know when
really?
either. They just said 2024.
Okay.
So
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we get a nice little holiday Christmas special from the Invincible crew. I think that could totally be in the cards. I mean,
that'd
like
be a
kind
nice
of similar to
surprise.
the Adam Eve
That'd be nice.
special. Hey, Kirkman, if you're out there, brother, Kirkman, Otley, anyone, if you're
Make
hearing
it happen.
me, yeah, make it happen. But I mean, that kind of really brings us to the end of this episode, at least major things of this episode. But something else I want to talk about very quickly before we wrap this up and get out of here. We've talked about it on pretty much every episode. We need to rename this show to the Debbie show, or Debbie's Redemption, or whatever. But we got to talk about Debbie again. We get some more great Debbie stuff. And again, I've said this, I think, in every episode we've done so far, but I'll say it again, and I'll say it in all the other episodes too. I just love what they're doing with Debbie. I love the character and how they're portraying her in the show versus the comic books. We've talked about that at length, so I won't go, too into that. But I think we get another really great example of all these things that we've been talking about with her conversation. I forget the guy's name. It's brain farting here. The costume maker guy,
Art.
Mark Hamill. Art,
Art.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, my members of the Invincicult out there in the comments below, remind me if this happened. I don't remember this happening, but the scene of Art and Debbie talking, which they have a bunch of conversations in the books, but specifically what I love is how Art tells her, like, you don't need Omni-Man. Like, you were
Right.
doing this shit all on your own way before that. And he specifically says you have strength. Like, you don't need that bum. And again, I just love it. And I love how in the show, again, we get more autonomy from Debbie. She's a lot more independent from the relationship with Nolan, but we still get that she's still upset about it, obviously, and she still
Yeah.
misses him. And I think, again, that's like where the book really focuses on that, of her missing him, and missing that the life that they made. I love how the show still acknowledges that, but that's
Yep.
not the focus of her reasoning and stuff. And again, I love that. I think it's a great change and makes
Yeah.
Debbie and the story just a lot better.
100%. It was a great moment of her having this like realization of kind of she was doing it on her own the whole time. I think that was really nice. Pretty much like how you've explained this whole time about how much better of a characterization they've done of her in the show versus the book, and that's just hats off to Robert Kirkman for only enhancing his past work and making it better and more current. It's cool to see that kind of stuff. And we also see Donald stab himself.
Dude,
He
yes.
realizes
Oh man, that's another thing we gotta talk about.
something's messed up.
Dude, Donald, again, we gotta wrap this up, but very quickly, thoughts on Donald, man. What do you think is going on with that dude?
He's something. That's not
He's
human.
Yeah, he's something.
But what a wild realization for that character, to realize that he got killed and blew up.
Yeah, when he watches that video, oh man.
Now, this is me theorizing. I don't know if this is right. Don't tell me if I'm right.
Please theorize.
I think he's a robot. Because for one, it made me think he explodes, self-destruct sequence. Makes sense. And when he stabs himself to see if he bleeds, but then he sees the knife's bent.
Mm-hmm.
which makes me think it's some kind of like hard metal.
I
in
mean, that's
his-
classic Terminator right there. Like
yeah,
stabbing and the knife or whatever gets bent. Like,
because I think I didn't notice the knife bending the first time I watched it, and I was like,
mhm.
oh, he's normal. And then when I rewatched, I was like, oh, it was bent. What the fuck was I thinking? Totally missed that. What was I
Yeah.
doing?
I don't know, man. I'm not gonna say nothing because, like we talked about, I still want some good surprises for the
Yeah,
audience out there. But
that's just my thinking of
yeah,
what we know.
there's definitely shit is up with Donald for sure, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that we got this little tease of that in this episode, and I'm super interested and excited to see if we're gonna be dealing with that a lot more in the second half, or if they're gonna kind of save that for future seasons. Like I would imagine we get the explanation in this next part of the series, but I think we're gonna really explore that kind of later on. But Sean, before we wrap this up, we got a favorite moment of the episode for episode 4. What was your best moment of this episode?
Dude, the ultimatum laid down to Mark, I think. I mean, I love the fight. It kind of all kind of gets lumped in together. The fight was amazing, but that choice he has to make now, because I'm just so curious what he's gonna do. Like
Yeah.
that's an impossible choice for that character. So I just don't know how he's gonna handle it. And
Mhm.
like, does he go right there to Cecil and say it's gonna happen? Like, what? Like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, is he gonna tell anybody? Like, I mean, you tell Cecil and it's gonna be all hands on deck, like,
Right.
preparation for war. And is that necessarily good either? So
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think I gotta agree. I feel like we did this last week, but I gotta agree with you. That was my favorite moment as well. But just for the sake of the game, I'm gonna pick a different one. And I'm gonna go with the moment you were talking about where Nolan starts choking Mark and he's like, "Why do I feel this way? Like this is like how is this better?" I love that moment. And again, going from like the changes from the book and screen, I think that it was just so well done, and the again addition of, well, this is how you should have felt on Earth was
Right.
just ooh, icing on the cake for me. I loved it. I
So
thought it
good.
was such a great moment. But last, on top of that, one last thing I got to ask you, since now we're in unknown territory now, Sean. We have not seen any more episodes, and we have to wait just like everybody else to watch the other half of the season. So I got to ask you, Sean, what is, I guess, one thing, or just overall, what are you really hoping we get from this second half of season 2, and like for them to wrap this season up?
I definitely think it's going to be a big payoff for Angstrom Levy, and I'm excited to see how that storyline plays out. But I'm also kind of what we are just talking about. Like, I need to see how Mark reacts to the end of this,
Hmm.
And I saw Kirkman say episode 4 and episode 8 are the craziest ones, but episode 8 is way crazier than episode 4. So, like,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what's in that episode to make this episode seem not that crazy.
Dude, you and me both. And again, that's what's so great about this show. And like we've talked about this extensively throughout these episodes, but like they are able to fit so much into each episode. Where when Kirkman says that, there's like from where we are in the story in the books right now, right? There's like at least 2 or 3 different things that he could be referencing in there, right? And
Right.
it's like I have no idea. Like the one big thing that I'm thinking of, which I'm not going to spoil here, but I'm thinking about it. They could do the event that I'm thinking about. They could do that in one episode easily. So
Hmm.
it's like,
Okay.
okay, so they can do that in one episode, but we have 4 more episodes to go. So
Right.
who knows how much shit they're gonna be able to fit into 4 more episodes, each an hour long. Like it's
Right.
anyone's guess of, like I said, obviously the people who have read the comics, we have an idea of where it's going, but
Right.
again, the way they kind of change things around and switch things around, it's really anyone's guess of how exactly they're gonna adapt it to the screen. And again, there's like a couple different major events that episode 8 could be referring to. It's just a matter of how much are we going to get in each episode going forward.
Right. Yeah. I'm excited to see what they put in front of us.
I
For
can't
sure.
wait. I'm so excited. I'm sure everyone at home watching and listening are just as excited as we are. And like we said, so we have seen the first 4 episodes. We're just with you guys waiting for the second half of the season as well. So, but don't worry. That does not mean that this show is over. We are going to be back. We are going to be back talking Invincible. Me and Sean are not going anywhere. We will be back with you to break down all the great nerdy stuff and everything that's going to be coming and where we're going. And I can't be more excited, man. Everything we're talking about here.
Yep.
I'm like getting more hyped up just even like as we're recapping this and going back through it. But as always, Sean, I cannot thank you enough for doing this with me. I am super excited to get to the second half of this season and to do more episodes with you. And it's gonna be great. And I'm gonna tell you guys out there right now, you think you're ready, you are not ready. You are
I'm not ready.
you are not ready for what's coming. And even after that, like this Invincible is crazy. It's a crazy story. It's a story that I think just kind of gets better and better as it moves along. And not only better, but crazier, more, bigger stakes, bigger characters. It's going to be a fun time, y'all. It's going to be a fun ride.
I can't wait. I'm so happy to be along for the ride. 100%.
Everyone out there, if you guys have been enjoying this series, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a like, subscribe. Make sure you go and subscribe to Metalcore Nerd, Sean's channel. Great show. Amazing music, news, current event, anything you want. They do it. They cover it, and it's a great show. Please go subscribe to them. But as far as Invincible goes, I mean, I guess I have to make the corny joke. We'll see y'all next year, and when we come back for the second half of this season. Sean, do you have anything else for the people before we get out of here?
No, but thanks for having me on this after show. I can't wait to do more when Invincible returns, and everyone have a good holiday,
Yes, everyone out there have a great holiday. And like Sean said, Invincible will return, and that means Beyond Invincible will also return. So we will see you guys all next time. Thank you.